Natalia Carter had never expected to start her day by finding a shivering golden retriever puppy in the middle of a rain-soaked sidewalk. But there it was, a tiny, trembling ball of fur, its deep brown eyes pleading for help. "Oh, you poor thing," Natalia murmured, gently scooping the puppy into her arms, feeling its damp fur against her skin. "Where did you come from?" the puppy whimpered, nestling into her chest as if it had found safety at last. Natalia glanced around, searching for an owner, but the streets were empty except for the streaks of city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. She sighed. "Guess you're coming with me." By the time she got home, the puppy had fallen asleep in her arms. She wrapped it in a soft towel, rubbing its tiny body dry before setting it down on her couch. "You must belong to someone," she said, scratching behind its ears as it yawned. "But until I find them, you're staying here." The next morning, Natalia set out to find the puppy's owner. She printed flyers, checked lost pet notices, and even stopped by the nearest vet for a microchip scan. Nothing. 2 days passed, and the little golden retriever whom she had temporarily named Benny had already become attached to her. He followed her everywhere, his tiny paws tapping on the wooden floor of her small apartment, making her laugh despite the stress of her everyday life. Then, on the 3rd day, everything changed. Natalia had just stepped out of a cafe, Benny in her arms, when a sleek black car pulled up in front of her. The back door opened, and a man stepped out. Not just any man, he looked like he had walked straight out of a high-end magazine. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp blue eyes and dark hair neatly styled, he was dressed in an expensive-looking suit that probably cost more than her rent. His gaze landed on Benny, and for a brief second, something softened in his expression. Then his eyes flickered to her. "That's my dog." His voice was deep, firm, and authoritative. Natalia blinked. "Excuse me." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "That puppy, he's mine." Benny, oblivious to the tension, wagged his tail and let out a happy bark. Natalia tightened her hold on the pup. "I've been taking care of him for 3 days. If he's yours, where have you been?" His jaw tensed. "He ran off while I was out of town. My assistant was supposed to take care of him, but clearly that didn't go as planned." Natalia raised an eyebrow. "And you are?" "Yaroslav Montgomery." She frowned. The name sounded familiar. Then it hit her: Yaroslav Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Enterprises, a billionaire, the man whose face had been plastered all over business magazines. "You're serious?" she asked. "Dead serious." His piercing gaze locked onto hers. "And I'd like my dog back." Natalia hesitated, glancing at Benny, who looked up at her with trusting eyes. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Yaroslav exhaled sharply, pulling out his phone. A few swipes later, he showed her a picture: Benny, sitting in a luxurious-looking penthouse, wearing the same tiny collar he had on now. Her heart sank. "Oh," he held out his hands, "I'll take him now." But as he reached for Benny, the puppy squirmed in Natalia's arms, letting out a distressed whimper before burying his face in her sweater. Yaroslav paused, his face unreadable. Natalia sighed. "I think he's scared." He stared at them for a long moment before his lips pressed into a thin line. "Fine, you've taken care of him for days. Come with me," she blinked. "What?" "Come with me," he repeated, "to my place, so he can transition back properly." Natalia hesitated. Spending time with a billionaire CEO in his penthouse? Completely absurd. But one look at Benny's nervous eyes and she knew she couldn't just hand him over like a package. "All right," she said, ignoring the part of her brain screaming that this was a terrible idea, but only for a little while. Yaroslav nodded, gesturing for her to follow him to his car. As she climbed in, she had no idea that this encounter would lead to something far more complicated than returning a lost puppy. Natalia sat stiffly in the luxurious leather seat of Yaroslav's car, acutely aware of how out of place she felt. The silence between them stretched, broken only by the soft hum of the engine and the occasional whimper from Benny, who was curled up in her lap. Yaroslav, seated beside her, exuded an effortless confidence, his fingers drumming lightly on his knee as he gazed out the window. The city lights cast fleeting shadows over his sharp features, making him look even more untouchable. She cleared her throat, needing to fill the silence. So, what exactly do you do at Montgomery Enterprises? His gaze flicked to her, assessing. You don't know. I know you're the CEO, she admitted, but I don't follow business news much. A trace of amusement crossed his face, as if her lack of interest in his status was a novelty. We handle global real estate acquisitions. Hotels, high-end residential properties, commercial towers. She nodded slowly. So you buy buildings. That's a simplistic way to put it. His tone was neutral, but something in his expression shifted, as if he wasn't used to explaining himself. I restructure failing assets, turn losses into profits. It's about vision, timing, and knowing when to take risks. Natalia absorbed that, suddenly aware of how different their worlds were. She worked as a freelance illustrator, scraping by on commissions and part-time gigs. The idea of making decisions that involved entire skyscrapers was unfathomable. The car slowed in front of a towering glass building, and the driver pulled into a private underground entrance. A valet stepped forward immediately, opening the door for them. Yaroslav stepped out first, then turned to her expectantly. She hesitated before following, clutching Benny close. The moment she stepped inside, she was hit by the sheer opulence of the space. Marble floors gleamed under soft, recessed lighting, and an artfully designed chandelier hung above the entrance, casting intricate patterns on the ceiling. She barely had time to take it all in before Yaroslav led her into a private elevator. The doors slid shut, enclosing them in a space so quiet she could hear Benny's tiny breaths. He pressed a button, and the elevator began its smooth ascent. You live here? She asked, glancing at the sleek paneling. The penthouse, he confirmed. Of course. When the doors opened, Natalia stepped out into an expansive living space that overlooked the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. The room exuded understated luxury, dark wood, muted tones, and tastefully placed art pieces that probably cost more than her entire apartment lease. Benny wriggled in her arms, his tail wagging furiously. Clearly, he recognized his home. Yaroslav crouched down, extending a hand. Come here, boy. For a moment, the puppy hesitated, glancing between them. Then, slowly, he patted over, sniffing Yaroslav's hand before licking it tentatively. A strange expression flickered across Yaroslav's face, something softer, almost relieved. He ran a hand over Benny's fur, his movements more careful than Natalia expected. She crossed her arms. He really missed you. His jaw tightened slightly. I should have been here. There was something unspoken in those words, a weight she didn't fully understand. But before she could ask, a voice interrupted them. Sir, welcome back. Natalia turned to see a middle-aged man in a crisp black suit standing near the entrance. His gaze flickered to her before settling on Yaroslav. Mr. Carmichael, Yaroslav acknowledged. This is Natalia Carter. She found Benny and took care of him. Carmichael's expression remained neutral, though Natalia swore she caught a flicker of surprise. Miss Carter, a pleasure. Nice to meet you, she said, still feeling out of place. Prepare a guest room, Yaroslav instructed. Natalia blinked. Wait, guest room. Yaroslav stood, meeting her gaze evenly. You said you didn't want to hand him over cold. You'll stay for a few days, help him adjust. Her mouth opened, then closed. I didn't think you meant literally staying here. He arched a brow. It makes sense, doesn't it? Logical or not, the idea of staying in a billionaire's penthouse was absurd. I can't just move in, she argued. I have a life, a job. I'll compensate you for any missed work, she frowned. That's not the point. I don't need your money. Then consider it a favor to Benny. His voice was calm, but there was something resolute in his gaze, as if he wasn't used to people refusing him. Benny, oblivious to the conversation, had already started exploring the penthouse, his tiny paws clicking against the floor. Natalia sighed, rubbing her temple. Just for a couple of days. Yaroslav inclined his head as if he had known she'd agree all along. Carmichael nodded. I'll have the room prepared immediately. Natalia exhaled, still unsure how she had ended up in this situation. But as she watched Yaroslav kneel and let Benny excitedly climb onto his lap, she knew one thing for certain: this man, despite his wealth and power, cared deeply about his dog. And that realization made him a little less intimidating. Natalia woke to the soft padding of tiny paws against the hardwood floor. Blinking against the morning light filtering through the massive windows of the guest room, she turned her head to see Benny sitting by the edge of the bed, tail wagging expectantly. "You're up early," she murmured, stretching before scooping him into her arms. The events of the previous day settled into her mind as she glanced around the luxurious guest suite, far too elegant for someone like her. The crisp white sheets, the subtly scented air, and the panoramic view of the city skyline made her feel as though she had woken up in a completely different world. She had agreed to stay only for a few days, yet the weight of that decision now felt heavier in the morning light. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Yaroslav's deep voice carried through the wood. "Are you awake?" She hesitated before answering. "Yeah, give me a second." Benny scrambled out of her arms as she swung her legs over the side of the bed, running straight to the door. When she opened it, Yaroslav stood there in a dark button-down and fitted slacks, looking effortlessly put together as usual. He held 2 mugs of coffee. "I figured you might need one." Natalia accepted the cup cautiously. "Thanks." "Do you always greet your house guests with coffee?" His lips twitched slightly. "Only the ones who take care of my dog." She took a sip, the rich warmth instantly waking her up. "So, is this where you tell me my presence is no longer required?" Yaroslav leaned against the door frame, considering her. "Actually, I was thinking the opposite. You should stay longer." Natalia almost choked on her coffee. "Excuse me. Benny is still adjusting. He's comfortable with you. It makes sense for you to stay until he fully settles back in." She narrowed her eyes. "This sounds suspiciously like a negotiation tactic." "I negotiate for a living. I can tell." She folded her arms. "And what exactly do I get out of this arrangement?" Yaroslav didn't hesitate. "No rent for the duration of your stay. Anything you need you'll have access to, and you'll get to enjoy the city from a view most people never will." She exhaled, watching him carefully. "You're used to getting your way, aren't you?" He met her gaze steadily. "I don't make offers without reason." Natalia glanced down at Benny, who was happily chewing on the hem of her pajama pants. As much as she hated to admit it, there was something undeniably tempting about staying a little longer. Still, she wasn't about to make it easy for him. "Fine," she relented, "but only until Benny is fully comfortable." Yaroslav nodded as though he had already known she'd agree. "Good," she groaned. "I already regret this." "No, you don't." He turned to leave, but not before she caught the hint of something new in his expression, an emotion she couldn't quite name. Later that afternoon, Natalia found herself standing in Yaroslav's private kitchen, a space that looked like it had been designed for a high-end culinary magazine rather than actual use. Marble countertops stretched endlessly, and the view from the floor-to-ceiling windows made her feel like she was floating above the city. She had been looking for something to snack on when Yaroslav entered, rolling up the sleeves of his shirt. "You're staring at the fridge like it personally offended you," he observed. "I was just trying to figure out if you actually eat here or if this is just a display kitchen." He opened the fridge, revealing an array of neatly arranged fresh ingredients. "I eat here. Do you cook?" "When I have time." Natalia raised an eyebrow. "I can't picture you standing over a stove." He pulled out a carton of eggs and a bundle of herbs. "You're welcome to be surprised." She leaned against the counter, watching as he cracked eggs into a bowl with practiced ease. "I feel like I've stepped into an alternate reality where billionaires casually make omelets." Yaroslav glanced at her. "You think my life is that different from yours?" she scoffed. "Absolutely." He stirred the eggs, his expression unreadable. "Not as much as you think." Natalia wasn't sure how to respond to that, so instead, she watched as he moved effortlessly around the kitchen, chopping herbs with precision before pouring the eggs into a pan. The scent of butter and fresh basil filled the kitchen as he plated the food and slid a dish in front of her. She hesitated. "So, what's the catch?" "No catch." She picked up a fork and took a bite. To her frustration, it was delicious. Yaroslav sat across from her, his gaze steady. "You don't trust me," she swallowed, meeting his eyes. "I don't trust situations that seem too good to be true." For a moment he said nothing. Then at last he leaned back, his expression contemplative. "I suppose that's fair." Natalia wasn't sure what to make of that, but one thing was clear: Yaroslav Montgomery was not the man she had expected him to be, and that realization was starting to unsettle her more than she cared to admit. Natalia stood on the balcony of Yaroslav's penthouse. The city sprawled beneath her in a sea of glittering lights. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain from earlier in the evening. Benny sat beside her, his fluffy golden coat warmed by the soft glow of the outdoor heater. She had been here longer than she originally planned. What was supposed to be a brief stay had stretched into something else entirely, something she couldn't quite define. Yaroslav stepped outside, his presence drawing her attention before he even spoke. He placed a glass of red wine on the railing beside her, his fingers brushing hers for the briefest moment before he pulled away. "I thought you might like something to drink," he said. Natalia accepted the glass, watching him as he leaned against the railing, his gaze fixed on the skyline. There was something different about him tonight, less guarded, more contemplative. "You don't strike me as the type to just enjoy the view," she said, his lips curved slightly. "I do when there's something worth looking at." Her heart stuttered at the way he said it, his voice low and sure. She took a sip of her wine, needing a distraction from the sudden intensity between them. "You're different than I expected," she admitted. He turned his head slightly, studying her. "And what did you expect?" she exhaled, considering her answer. "Someone detached, cold. The kind of man who sees people as numbers on a spreadsheet." Yaroslav let out a quiet breath, something close to amusement. "That's what people assume when they only know my name." She set her glass down, turning to face him fully. "And what should they know instead?" He was silent for a moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. Then, finally, he spoke. "I grew up with nothing," he said. "My mother worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over our heads. I learned early that if I wanted security, I had to build it myself." Natalia hadn't expected that. She had assumed he had come from wealth, that his world had always been made of glass towers and private cars. "She must be proud of you," she said softly. A shadow crossed his face. She passed before she could see any of this. Her chest tightened. "I'm sorry." He nodded once, his jaw tight. "Benny was supposed to be for her. She always wanted a dog, but we never had the space or the money for one. When I finally could afford anything, it was too late." Natalia swallowed the lump in her throat, looking down at Benny, who was now curled up at their feet. "She would have loved him," she said. Yaroslav's gaze dropped to the puppy, something unreadable passing through his expression. "Yeah. She would have." The silence between them stretched, heavy with things left unsaid. Then Yaroslav turned to her, stepping closer. "You make this place feel different," he said, his voice quieter now. "Less like a space, more like a home." Natalia's breath caught. He was too close, the scent of his cologne mixing with the crisp night air. She forced herself to speak. "I think that has more to do with Benny." His eyes held hers. "No, it doesn't." She could feel the tension between them, thick and undeniable. She knew she should step back, should say something light to break the moment, but she didn't want to. Yaroslav lifted a hand, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, reverent, as if he was memorizing the feel of her skin. "Natalia," he murmured. She didn't know who moved first, but suddenly his lips were on hers, warm and insistent. The city disappeared, the night air forgotten. There was only him, the way he kissed her, as if he had been waiting for this moment, as if he had been holding back until now. Her hands gripped the front of his shirt, pulling him closer. He responded instantly, deepening the kiss, his fingers trailing down her back, leaving a path of fire in their wake. When they finally pulled away, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I don't want you to leave," he admitted. Natalia's heart pounded. She had known this was coming, had felt it in the way he looked at her, in the way he spoke her name. "Yaroslav." She started, but he shook his head. "Stay," he said, "not for Benny, not because it makes sense. Stay because you want to." She searched his eyes, seeing something there she hadn't expected: uncertainty. The man who was always in control, always composed, was laying himself bare for her, and the truth was, she didn't want to leave. Taking a deep breath, she whispered, "Okay." The relief in his expression was immediate. He kissed her again, softer this time, as if sealing the promise between them. Benny let out a sleepy sigh, oblivious to the fact that his little adventure had changed everything. Natalia stood by the grand piano in Yaroslav's penthouse, tracing the cool ivory keys with her fingertips. The night outside was quiet, the city lights stretching endlessly beyond the glass windows. Benny lay curled up on the rug near the fireplace, his tiny paws twitching in sleep. Yaroslav watched her from the kitchen, where he was pouring 2 glasses of wine. He carried them over, offering her one. She accepted it, their fingers brushing briefly. "Do you play?" he asked, nodding toward the piano. She hesitated. "I used to, when I was younger." His gaze sharpened with interest. "Why did you stop?" Natalia took a slow sip of her wine before answering. "Life got in the way, bills, responsibilities. Music became something I didn't have time for anymore." Yaroslav leaned against the piano, his expression thoughtful. "That's a shame." She let out a small laugh. "I doubt I was that good anyway. Play something," she blinked. "Now," he nodded. "I want to hear you." Natalia hesitated, but something about the way he looked at her made it impossible to refuse. Tentatively, she sat down on the bench and placed her hands on the keys. A melody she hadn't played in years came to life under her fingertips, soft and hesitant at first, then stronger, more confident. Yaroslav said nothing, simply listening. When she finished, she turned to him, expecting some teasing remark, but his expression was unreadable. "You were wrong," he said. "You are good." A warmth spread through her chest, unexpected and disarming. "It's been a long time." "Doesn't matter, talent doesn't fade." She set her hands in her lap, looking at him. "You keep surprising me." His lips curled slightly. "I could say the same about you." The air between them shifted, something deeper settling in the silence. Yaroslav set his glass down and reached for her hand, running his thumb over her knuckles. "You said life got in the way of music. What else did it take from you?" Natalia swallowed, feeling the weight of his question. "Dreams." He didn't look away. "Then maybe it's time to take them back." She exhaled, shaking her head. "It's not that simple." "It never is," he agreed, "but that doesn't mean it's impossible." Something about the certainty in his voice made her believe, just for a moment, that maybe he was right. She squeezed his hand. "You're dangerous, you know that." His brow lifted. "How so?" "You make me want things I stopped allowing myself to want." Yaroslav's grip tightened slightly. "Then let yourself want them again." Her heart pounded as he leaned in, pressing a slow, deliberate kiss to her palm. Before she could respond, Benny let out a sleepy sigh, stretching on the rug. The moment broke and Natalia chuckled, pulling her hand away. "You're lucky your dog has perfect timing," she teased. Yaroslav exhaled a quiet laugh. "For now." The next day, Yaroslav insisted on taking her out. "Where are we going?" she asked as they stepped into his car. "You'll see," he replied, offering nothing more. The drive took them away from the towering skyline and into a quieter part of the city. When they arrived, Natalia stepped out, her breath catching as she took in their destination. It was a music conservatory. She turned to him, eyes wide. "Why are we here? You said you stopped playing because life got in the way." He gestured toward the entrance. "Let's see if that's still true." Natalia hesitated, her hands curling into fists. "Yaroslav, this is a chance," he interrupted. "Just walk inside, no expectations, no pressure." Her pulse raced as she looked at the building, then back at him. He was giving her something she hadn't dared to reach for in years. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. Inside, the air was thick with the sound of instruments. A grand piano sat in the center of the room, polished and waiting. Yaroslav nodded toward it. "Play." Natalia's hands trembled as she sat down. She pressed one key, then another. The sound was rich, fuller than anything she had played in years, and then she lost herself in the music. Yaroslav stood nearby, arms crossed, watching her. When she finally stopped, she turned to him, breathless. His voice was quiet but firm. "You should never have stopped." Emotion swelled in her throat. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything, just keep playing." Her heart pounded, not just because of the music, but because of him, because of what he was offering her. A future she hadn't dared to imagine. That night back at the penthouse, Natalia stood on the balcony again, the city stretching before her. Yaroslav stepped beside her, silent for a long moment. "You're staying," he said, more statement than question. She turned to him, searching his face. "Yes, but not just for Benny." Something flickered in his eyes, something deep and unguarded. "I know." She reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. "You make me want more, and that scares me." Yaroslav tightened his grip. "Then let me prove to you that wanting more isn't a mistake," Natalia exhaled, leaning into him. "You already have." He tilted her chin up, pressing a slow, reverent kiss to her lips, and for the first time in a long time she let herself believe in something more. Natalia stood in the center of Yaroslav's penthouse, staring at the bouquet of deep red roses that had appeared on the grand dining table. Their fragrance filled the air, rich and intoxicating. A small card rested beside them, bearing only one word in his elegant handwriting: "Stay." Her heart pounded. He had already asked her to stay in words and in quiet gestures, but this felt different, more permanent. Yaroslav entered the room, pausing when he saw her standing there. His gaze flickered to the flowers, then back to her. "You're quiet," he observed. She ran a finger over one of the petals. "I don't know what to say." He stepped closer, his presence commanding yet careful. "Then don't say anything, just tell me what you're thinking." Natalia inhaled deeply. "This feels big." "It is." His voice was steady, firm. "Because I don't do things halfway, Natalia." She turned to face him fully. "And you're sure about this?" Yaroslav didn't hesitate. "I've never been more certain of anything." Emotion swelled in her chest. She had spent so much of her life second-guessing, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. But Yaroslav, he didn't hesitate. He didn't falter. He simply knew what he wanted, and he wanted her. She exhaled a soft laugh, shaking her head. "You make everything sound so simple." He tilted his head slightly. "Because it is. I want you here, with me." Warmth spread through her, settling deep in her bones. "Then I guess I'm staying." A flicker of something rare crossed his face, relief. He reached for her, pulling her in, his arms solid and unwavering. She melted into him, her fingers gripping the fabric of his shirt as his lips pressed against her temple. "You won't regret this," he murmured. She closed her eyes. "I already know that." Days passed, each one weaving them tighter together. Natalia found herself falling into a rhythm with Yaroslav, their lives intertwining in ways she hadn't expected. They shared quiet mornings over coffee, late nights with Benny curled between them on the couch, and fleeting touches that spoke volumes. But one evening, as she sat sketching in the living room, she noticed Yaroslav standing by the window, his posture tense. She set her pencil down. "What's wrong?" He didn't turn. "There's something I need to tell you." Her stomach tightened. "Okay." Yaroslav finally faced her, his expression unreadable. "I was supposed to leave for London next week, a business deal that's been in negotiations for months." Natalia swallowed. "And I canceled it." Her breath caught. "Because of me." His eyes locked onto hers. "Because of us." She stood, closing the distance between them. "Yaroslav, I don't want you giving up things for me." "This isn't giving up anything." His voice was firm. "This is choosing what matters more." Her chest ached at the intensity of his words. "And you're sure?" His fingers brushed her cheek. "I've built my life around numbers, deals, and logic. This," he gestured between them. "This isn't logic, this is certainty." Natalia's throat tightened. You're impossible. A rare smile tugged at his lips. And yet you're still here. She laughed softly, wrapping her arms around his neck. Yeah, I am. He kissed her then, slow and deliberate, sealing the promise between them. Weeks passed, each one bringing them closer. Natalia's sketches filled the penthouse, her laughter echoing through the space that had once felt too pristine, too untouchable. One evening, Yaroslav led her to the rooftop, where a candlelit table awaited them. Fairy lights twinkled above, casting a warm glow over the city below. Natalia's breath hitched. What is this? Yaroslav pulled out a chair for her. Dinner, she sat, still trying to process the sheer romance of it all. You've outdone yourself. He poured them both wine, his movements deliberate. I wanted tonight to be special. Natalia studied him, a feeling stirring in her chest. Yaroslav. He reached into his pocket, and time seemed to slow. She froze, her heart slamming against her ribs as he pulled out a small velvet box. Yaroslav opened it, revealing a stunning engagement ring, elegant, timeless, breathtaking. His voice was steady, unwavering. I don't want a life without you, Natalia. Tears pricked her eyes. Yaroslav. He took her hand, his fingers warm and sure. Marry me. Emotion clogged her throat. This man, who had once seemed untouchable, had laid his heart bare for her. She nodded, her voice breaking. Yes. Relief flashed across his face before he slid the ring onto her finger. Then he kissed her, deep and consuming, as if sealing a future that had already been written. Months later, beneath a canopy of white roses, Natalia walked toward Yaroslav, her heart full and steady. He stood at the altar, looking at her as if she was the only thing that had ever mattered. When she reached him, he took her hands, his grip firm and certain. The vows were spoken, promises exchanged, and when he finally kissed her as his wife, the world melted away. Benny barked happily from the sidelines, the only witness who had truly seen them from the beginning. As Yaroslav pulled her close, whispering how much he loved her against her ear, Natalia knew this was exactly where she was meant to be.